It's the 1st of November, and despite the fact that my dahlias have yet to have a killing frost, they have had a few light frosts that they've managed to survive, it's still time for me to lift my dahlias from the ground. Now, this is not the same for everybody, but my ground is beginning to get very, very wet underfoot. There are areas of standing water within the garden. So if I leave my dahlias in the ground for any longer, I do risk them beginning to rot. So I planted my dahlias in the middle of May, and I planted a mixture of both some tubers, which I'd pre-sprouted, and also some cuttings, which I'd purchased from Halls of Heddon. So I planted approximately 24 dahlias in my bed, and as I say, a mixture of both cuttings and tubers. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many viable tubers we can lift from this bed today. So before we get started, I'm going to take advantage of any beautiful dahlias that are left in the plant and take them in and pop them on my kitchen table. I've got a lovely bucket of flowers, and I mean, I've got some lovely scabious out of the tunnel here, which are just, look at that. And I just think it's funny how the garden creates itself, because which dahlias I've got left go so well with the scabious I've got left as well. So the ground's finally getting pretty wet here in the cut flower patch. So I lift my dahlias. Now, if you live somewhere with fairly sandy and free draining soil, you don't necessarily have to lift your dahlias over the winter. But if you have very wet, cold, heavy, claggy soil that doesn't drain particularly well, I really recommend lifting your dahlias so that they don't rot in the ground. If you want to know which varieties of dahlias you're keeping for the next year, it is important to label them. And of course, you want to label them while they still have flowers on them, because once you've cut the flowers off, the tubers will all look pretty much the same. So I went ahead and labelled my dahlias a couple of weeks ago. I'm really hoping that my cheap budget form of label, which was writing on a bit of brown tape and putting sellotape over the top of it, will have held. Well, we're about to find out. So I know that this particular dahlia is purple pearl, and I've cut these flowers from this dahlia here. So we'll make sure when we lift it, if it's not already labelled, which I'm hoping it is because I did label them a couple of weeks ago, if the label's still okay, we can package the tuber like that. But if the label has worn off, luckily we know who it is and we can relabel it. Now, it's important that when you're going to be digging up your dahlia tubers that you don't accidentally damage them with your spade or your fork. So you want to dig quite a wide area around them. Mine, actually, the soil here is really lovely and loose because this was mulched really heavily with sheep wool. So I think it's quite possible I'm actually going to be able to lift a lot of my dahlias without using a fork or shovel at all, which if I can, that would be perfect. Oh, okay, the good news is the labels are still there. So this is purple pearl, but actually when I store this in a minute, I will relabel it with a fresh label. Right, we're going to give this a clean off just to check that I can't see any signs of gall. Right, okay, so I'm going to keep the temporary label on for now, just so we don't forget who it is. So the tuber I'm about to dig up is this one, which is Amy Cave. And I'm just going to cut off the foliage so we can see what we're doing. So this particular Dahlia Amy Cave would have been planted as a cutting. So a tuber was not planted here, but I'm really hoping that it will have created one for me. Unfortunately, I've broken a tuber there. Right, let's give this one a clean off and see what we've got. Looks like it's a keeper. And that's where I lost the tuber, which is unfortunate. So that's a really nice tuber from Amy Cave. So we can go ahead and store that one. One is, oh, Kegel Ann, right. A lot of people have been saying that Kegel Ann hasn't been producing tubers, so it will be interesting to see what we've got here. Yeah, not much of one. In fact, it's sort of split itself. That's another Amy Cave. So this has been a good one for producing tubers for me. this is not going very well this year. Holberton Christabel. And there's not a very good tuber on this dahlia. Oh, that's a Holberton Christabel as well. Ah, now that one, and there is no tuber in the ground there. So this Holberton Christabel was planted as a cutting, but unfortunately it hasn't gone on to create a tuber for planting next year. So that's very unfortunate. Oh, I don't believe it. Unfortunately, I've got another dahlia with gall, and the reason this is so disappointing for me is because I've never grown dahlias in the bed that I'm growing them in, and all the dahlias I'm digging up thus far were grown from cuttings. So it's really disappointing to see that this one, and this was the only one I had of this, I think. This was the little white pom-pom, but you can see very clearly the growth here that are all fused together, and they shouldn't be touching like that. This dahlia, unfortunately, is another one to be thrown away, which is very disappointing. Now this is the first one that was a tuber when it went into the ground. And this was one of the tubers that I purchased that was supposed to be wine-eyed Jill, and it was actually a red dahlia.
So some people go ahead and divide their dahlia tubers now in the autumn so that they're already divided, ready to plant in the spring. But actually I don't divide mine now. I will wait, I'll store them as a clump, and then I'll go ahead and divide them in the spring.
Now this one has lots of shoots on it, but they don't appear to be fused. So there are lots of shoots on here, lots of eyes, but they're not actually touching. This was another one planted as a tuber, and they seem to have fared a lot better than the ones that I planted as cuttings. Now whether or not that was the drought, but I think next year I'll probably go for tubers. In case you're wondering, I fell over in the rain. I'm soaking wet, I'm covered in cyanoblossom seeds, and to top it off, all of this work and there were hardly any viable tubers to even keep.
So I will not be replanting dahlias in this bed next season. And because this bed will not be a raised bed, I also do not intend to have anything planted in here during the winter. So what I want to do now is get this bed ready for the spring. So we're going to give it a good mulch and then cover it over to stop weeds.
So unfortunately, my dahlias have not fared very well in the ground this summer. Basically, the dahlias that were planted as tubers have done absolutely fine, and they've multiplied. You know, they're much bigger tubers than when I put them into the bed. But those dahlias that I planted as cuttings, very few of them have produced tubers. And sadly, one of the ones which actually produced the better of the tubers, I had to throw them away because they had gall.
Gall is spread by a bacteria which usually enters the tubers through some form of damage, which is quite often caused by forks and trowels and things at the time of planting. It can also stay in the soil. So if you have had gall in a bed, it's best to leave it barren of dahlias for at least 2 years.
Now, lifting your dahlias does not guarantee they will be safe over the winter. You do need to store them in a completely frost-free environment. I was caught out one year by storing my dahlias in my tack room, which I felt was a perfectly dry, safe place for them, and unfortunately it wasn't. They were stored with quite a lot of water in the tubers. We'd had a really wet autumn, and then we had some really hard frosts really quickly, and they did actually freeze inside their crates with various insulation beddings around them. They still froze and they were all completely ruined. So this year, the few dahlias that I have managed to save are going to be stored in what I hope is a frost-free barn, although it will be the first time I've used it for storage. it's nearly dark now and I've got my animals to do, so I can't tell a lie, I haven't finished, but there's no frost tonight, so I can finish tomorrow. So there's plenty of airflow, but also a bit of insulation. So I think I've already shown you that I fell in the mud. I'm soaking wet, filthy, but I've got a lovely bucket of flowers.
Have you dug up your dahlias yet, or indeed are you digging them up at all? Have you had any plants that you've dug up missing tubers, and have you been unfortunate enough to have any gall? Please let me know in the comments, I would love to know.